Welcome back to Monday's Muse. I'm Rachel Keefe, and this week's episode is a very little bit about salvation. In yesterday morning's Sunday school class, we were talking about the United Church of Christ Statement of Faith, and there's a line in it that says, "God seeks in holy love to save all people from aimlessness and sin." And as you might guess, that brought up some interesting conversations. There were two questions that kind of came out of that I think are important to talk a little bit about today. One of them was, what exactly does God save us from? Aimlessness and sin, yes, but what does that mean? That was one question. And the other question is, when does salvation start? Those are two pretty big questions, and I'm going to try to give relatively small answers. So the first question, what are we saved from? I believe that God seeks to save us from the experience of going through life alone and the suffering and pain that we can feel if we think we are disconnected from anyone and everything to one extent or another. When we have an experience of God's presence, when we come to believe that God is real, then we are no longer alone. We know that wherever we go, whatever we experience, God is present with us. In the joyful, happy times, in the lonely, despairing, hopeless times, and all of the more or less ordinary times in between, God is present. So we are saved from feeling separated, feeling alone. And I know it's a whole lot more complicated than that, but that is at least the beginning of an answer. And the other, when does salvation start? It starts the moment we recognize that God is indeed present and active in the world. It's not something that starts later, after death, or once we've earned it. But it really is already ours for the asking. It's just when we recognize God's presence, then salvation begins. I want to add a third thing to this, because the Statement of Faith said that God seeks in holy love to save us from aimlessness and sin. So assuming that God acts in the world with holy love, that means that nothing that happens to us is a punishment for sin. So any illness or tragedy or trauma is not God's judgment on us. Sometimes things happen due to random factors in nature, in the world. Sometimes things happen because human beings make spectacularly bad choices that God would really rather we did not, and innocent people are hurt. But God does not play a part in bad things happening. It's important to remember that God's desire for us is to be in relationship, loving relationship with God, with one another, and with creation. So that's my very little bit, my little snippet of theology about salvation. I hope it's helpful. I welcome your comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.